15 years of marriage ended in a single night, and not with tears, but with threats. My wife stood in my garage with her personal trainer boyfriend, ready to take my house, my savings, and even my freedom. She thought a restraining order and false accusations would destroy me. What Amber didn't know was that betrayal can come from the people we trust most, and how we respond defines who we are. Have you ever faced a moment like this? Share your thoughts below. Your story matters. My name is Brock Sullivan. I'm 42 years old, and I supervise oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. This is the story of how betrayal in my own home pushed me to wage a different kind of war. One I refuse to lose. Let me tell you something about pressure. When you're working 200 feet above the Gulf waters, managing equipment that could kill you in a dozen creative ways, you learn to read warning signs. Metal fatigue, pressure drops, equipment failure, they all whisper before they scream. That evening when I pulled my F-250 into the driveway after another 14-day rotation, every instinct I'd honed over 20 years in dangerous work started screaming danger. My garage door rolled up with its usual metallic screech, and there they were. Amber, my wife of 15 years, standing next to some pretty boy like she owned the place. Her manicured fingers rested possessively on the tattooed forearm of Lance Rodriguez, a flashy personal trainer whose face plastered gym advertisements around Houston. Seeing him in my sanctuary, wearing one of my old Texans jerseys, felt like watching someone piss on everything I'd built. The garage had always been my decompression chamber. Power tools lined the walls like old friends. My welding station waited in the corner, and my Harley sat under its cover. 20 years of offshore work had taught me that a man needs a place where he can think straight, where the only pressure comes from air compressors and hydraulic jacks. Now these two were contaminating it with their bullshit. Amber's expression was colder than a January morning on the rig. Nothing like the woman who used to kiss me goodbye before every rotation, who used to worry about storms in the Gulf. "We need to talk," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel cable. I stepped out of my truck slow and easy, like approaching a volatile piece of equipment. My eyes never left Lance. 20 years of reading dangerous situations kicked in. Assess the threat, plan your response, control the environment. "Talk about what exactly?" My voice carried the same calm I used during emergency shutdowns. "I'm leaving you," Amber said, lifting her chin like she was announcing a promotion. "I've been seeing Lance for 8 months. I'm filing for divorce Monday." 8 months. The number hit like a pressure gauge redlining. I didn't flinch, but my mind ran the calculation instantly. Right around the time she started those late-night yoga classes and weekend fitness retreats to Austin. Right when she stopped asking about my rotations and started treating me like I was leaking oil on her clean floor. Lance stepped forward, cracking his knuckles with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real danger. "Leave now, oil boy, or I'll put you in the hospital," he growled, his Boston accent thick as crude. "She's with a real man now." I chuckled, the sound empty as a depressurized tank. "Personal training, huh?" I rolled up my work shirt sleeves, revealing scars that told stories Lance couldn't imagine. Burns from welding accidents, cuts from sharp metal, the kind of marks earned through actual labor. "That's cute. I've been working heavy machinery and handling dangerous situations for 20 years. Equipment that could crush you without even noticing. Funny thing is, I know exactly how much pressure it takes to break different things." Pride overruled survival instinct, and Lance swung first. Big mistake. I moved with the fluid precision learned from years of avoiding industrial accidents, catching his wrist mid-strike and applying just enough torque to make him understand how fragile bones really are. In seconds, Lance was face down on my concrete floor, his arm bent at an angle that spoke to his immediate future. I applied pressure like adjusting a valve, precise, controlled, educational. Amber screamed, but I kept my voice conversational. "This is my house," I said, my tone carrying the same authority I used during safety briefings. "You want to leave? There's the door, but nobody threatens me in my own space, especially not some gym rat who thinks lifting weights makes him dangerous." I released Lance, who scrambled backward like a spooked roughneck. Amber's face twisted with fury that could have powered a derrick. "You're both psychotic," she spat. "I'm taking half of everything, Brock. The house, the savings, your precious truck. My lawyer says I can get alimony for life." "Your lawyer can call mine," I replied, my voice steady as drilling mud circulation. "But next time you bring muscle to intimidate me, make sure it's someone who's been in actual fights, not pretty boys who think the gym is the real world." As Lance's challenger roared away like a spooked seagull, Amber's angry glare was the last thing I saw before they vanished into the Texas evening. I stood in the sudden silence, staring at the oil stain where Lance had kissed the concrete, feeling the weight of 15 wasted years settling over me like crude settling in a tank. Finally, I walked to my workbench and opened the drawer containing my old union contact book, numbers I hadn't dialed in years, connections from back when I was climbing the ladder instead of supervising from the top. "They want war," I murmured, my voice carrying the same deadly calm I used during blowout procedures. "They picked the wrong roughneck. Some pressure builds slow, like gas in a sealed tank. Other times, it explodes, fast and violent. Tonight, Amber and Lance had just ruptured the wrong pipeline. Time to show them what happens when you mess with someone who understands exactly how much pressure human beings can take before they break. I remember when Amber's smile used to light up like Christmas morning on a rig. Back when we first got married, she'd stand at the helicopter pad waving goodbye, looking like she actually gave a damn whether I made it home in one piece. Those were the days when she understood that offshore work wasn't just a job, it was feeding our future, building something solid while most people were content, living paycheck to paycheck. 15 years ago, Amber was a dental hygienist with dreams bigger than her paycheck. Soft-spoken, patient, the kind of woman who made coming home feel like winning the lottery. She'd greet me after every rotation like I'd been gone for months instead of 2 weeks, asking about the work, the guys, whether the weather had been rough. Back then, she saw my career as an adventure we were sharing, not some prison sentence I was serving. But offshore life changes people, sometimes in ways that sneak up on you like hydrogen sulfide in a confined space. After my promotion to supervisor, the money got better. Really good, actually. My salary plus hazard pay brought in $180,000 a year, enough to buy the house she wanted, the truck I needed, and still sock away serious money for retirement. Problem was, the better I got at my job, the longer the rotations became, and the more responsibilities landed on my shoulders. Amber's tone started shifting like weather patterns in the Gulf. She began making comments about other husbands who worked normal jobs and came home every night. Comments about how she felt like a single woman most of the time, how I cared more about those stupid rigs than our marriage. "You love that job more than you love me," she'd snap during our video calls, her voice carrying the kind of resentment that builds up like scale in old pipes. I tried explaining that the money was setting us up for life, that every rotation was an investment in our future, but Amber wanted presence more than prosperity, companionship more than financial security. Somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing my sacrifice as love and started seeing it as abandonment. The first time Lance Rodriguez's name came up, it was casual as mentioning the weather. Amber had joined some fancy gym, and Lance was this hotshot personal trainer who ran charity events for underprivileged kids. Sounded like a real community hero the way she talked about him. Flashy personality, local celebrity, the kind of guy who attracted attention like metal shavings to a magnet. While I was hundreds of miles offshore, earning money that most people could only dream about, Amber was getting swept up in Lance's orbit. Looking back, the warning signs were clear as pressure alarms, but I was too busy keeping crews safe and operations, running to pay proper attention to what was happening at home. Her phone habits changed first. Used to be, she'd leave it on the kitchen counter, no passwords, nothing to hide. Suddenly, it was always face down, locked tighter than a blowout preventer. Privacy, she called it when I asked. Girls' nights became more frequent, and she started coming home smelling like expensive cologne I'd never bought her. New workout clothes appeared in her closet, stuff that cost more than some people made in a week. Designer gym wear, jewelry, shoes that belonged on magazine covers rather than treadmills. When I asked about the sudden fashion upgrade, she claimed they were gifts from her fitness friends, or rewards for reaching her goals. Should have been my first clue that someone else was investing in her appearance. I wanted to believe her explanations because the alternative meant facing something I wasn't ready to handle. But 20 years of reading equipment failures had taught me that small problems become big disasters when you ignore the warning signs. Metal fatigue starts as tiny cracks you can barely see, then spreads until the whole structure fails catastrophically. What I discovered later would make the garage confrontation look like a minor equipment malfunction compared to the full-scale blowout they'd been planning. Amber and Lance hadn't just stumbled into some reckless affair. They'd been engineering a systematic demolition of everything I'd worked 20 years to build. While I was still offshore, thinking our biggest problem was her feeling neglected, Amber had already started laying the groundwork for my destruction. She'd been filing preliminary complaints with local police, painting me as a dangerous man struggling with work-related stress and anger issues. Little stories about erratic behavior, mood swings, veiled threats, all carefully crafted to create a paper trail. By the time I returned from my rotations, she'd already planted enough doubt in our social circle to make her upcoming accusations seem believable. Neighbors who used to wave friendly hellos started keeping their distance. Friends stopped returning my calls. Even some of my work colleagues began treating me differently, like they'd heard rumors they couldn't quite repeat. The real knife twist came when I learned that Amber had somehow gotten her hands on confidential information from my work files. Safety violations, incident reports, personnel reviews, details that should have been locked away tighter than a wellhead under pressure. Her lawyer was planning to use my own career record as ammunition, threatening to destroy my reputation in an industry where trust and reliability meant everything. Lance's role wasn't just providing muscle and romance. He was the perfect cover story, the reason Amber could claim she needed protection from her allegedly unstable husband. Together, they'd crafted a narrative that would leave me broke, homeless, and unemployable while they sailed off into the sunset with everything I'd bled to earn. Sitting in my garage that night, staring at the tools that had built our life together, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and confusion I'd expected never materialized. Instead, my anger crystallized into something harder and more dangerous. The same cold focus I used during emergency shutdowns, when lives hung in the balance and there was no room for emotion or error. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was equipment failure, and I knew exactly how to handle those. I reached for my union contact book, fingers finding numbers I hadn't dialed in years. If Amber and Lance wanted to play hardball, they'd pick the wrong guy to screw with. Wars aren't won with emotion. They're won with preparation, patience, and knowing exactly where to apply pressure for maximum damage. My first call went to Cole Patterson, a guy who'd worked rigs with me for 10 years before transitioning into union organizing. Cole understood the brotherhood that comes from trusting someone with your life every day for weeks at a time. More importantly, he'd developed connections in places that could dig up information on people who thought they were playing in shallow water. "You sound like hell, Sully," Cole said when he picked up, using my old nickname. His voice carried that easy confidence I remembered from our days working side by side. I skipped the pleasantries. "I need a favor, brother. Deep background checks on 2 people, Amber Crawford and Lance Rodriguez. I want everything. Bank accounts, business dealings, criminal connections. If they've so much as jaywalked in the last 6 months, I want documentation." Cole didn't ask questions. That's the beauty of working with guys who understand loyalty. "Give me 72 hours. While Cole worked his magic, I started setting up my end of the operation. 20 years in the oil field teaches you that successful projects require careful planning and attention to detail. I began documenting everything: phone records, credit card statements, any evidence of Amber's newfound spending habits. Every designer gym outfit, every unexplained dinner, every suspicious girls' night had a paper trail, and I was going to follow it like tracking a gas leak. Cole delivered early, as promised. 72 hours later, I sat at my workbench scrolling through files that painted a picture uglier than I'd expected. Lance Rodriguez wasn't just some charming personal trainer building a legitimate business. He was running a sports betting operation through his gym, collecting debts from clients who couldn't pay their gambling losses. The photos Cole sent showed Lance and 2 associates working over a local shop owner who'd refused to pay protection money, but Amber's involvement went deeper than I'd imagined. She wasn't just some love-struck woman who'd fallen for a bad boy's charm. She was actively laundering Lance's dirty money through her dental office job, using patient billing information to create fake charges and funnel cash into offshore accounts under false identities. My wife hadn't just cheated on me. She'd become a criminal. The most interesting discovery wasn't about their crimes, though. It was personal. Lance had a younger sister, Paige Rodriguez, a college student on a full pre-med scholarship. Clean record, honor roll student, completely uninvolved in her brother's schemes. According to the financial records Cole had compiled, Paige had no idea how Lance was paying for her education. She probably thought her big brother was just a successful trainer who cared about her future. Every tough guy has something soft, Cole had written in his report. This one's weakness walks around campus thinking her brother's a hero. I leaned back in my chair, processing the information like analyzing pressure data from multiple wells. Lance's soft spot was exactly the leverage I needed, but first, I had to get them to overextend themselves, to step so far out of line that their own greed would become the rope they'd hang themselves with. I spent the next 3 days performing like an actor, preparing for the role of his lifetime. I planted false financial records showing I'd received a massive performance bonus, letting slip details about offshore emergency pay and hazard compensation. During conversations I knew would get back to Amber, I staged a small argument with a neighbor where I mentioned work stress and sleepless nights, making sure her spy network would report back that I was mentally unstable and potentially violent. The performance worked better than I'd hoped. Within a week, Amber filed for emergency spousal support, claiming I was dangerous and demanded $8,500 monthly payments while freezing my primary accounts. Her lawyer painted me as an unstable oil worker with access to dangerous equipment and a history of workplace incidents that made me a threat to public safety. Sitting at my workbench that evening with a cold beer, I read through the legal documents and smiled like a man watching dominoes fall in perfect sequence. Every move Amber made was tightening the net I'd built around them. She thought she was hunting prey, not realizing she'd walked into a carefully constructed trap. Perfect, I muttered, raising my beer in a mock toast. The hungrier the fish, the deeper they take the hook. What Amber didn't understand was that 20 years offshore had taught me patience. Real patience, the kind that comes from knowing that rushing a dangerous operation gets people killed. She wanted fast money and immediate gratification. I was willing to wait for the perfect moment to bring their whole operation crashing down like a controlled demolition. I pulled up Lance's fight schedule on my phone. He had a match coming up at the Houston Boxing Club, some amateur bout that would put him in front of a crowd. Perfect. Nothing destroys a man's reputation faster than public humiliation, especially when that reputation is all he's got. Time to show Lance Rodriguez what happens when you pick a fight with someone who knows the difference between the gym and the real world. And Amber? She was about to learn that some wells run deeper than others, and this one was about to come in like a gusher. The Houston Boxing Club buzzed with anticipation like a rig floor before a major operation. Neon lights reflected off polished floors as people crowded around the amateur ring, money changing hands faster than drill bits on a tough formation. I moved through the chaos wearing maintenance coveralls and a club cap, invisible as a safety inspector during shift change. 20 years of navigating industrial sites made blending with working crews feel like second nature. Tonight, Lance Rodriguez's world would collapse like a poorly supported derrick, and Amber would have front row seats to watch it happen. She stood ringside in a red dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month, cheering Lance like she was already counting the money they'd stolen from me. Her smile looked genuine enough, but I knew better. That was the smile of someone who thought she'd outsmarted the smartest guy in the room. While Amber soaked up attention like crude soaking into sand, I slipped past security guards who were more interested in checking out the ring girls than doing their jobs. Years of experience taught me that confidence and a clipboard could get you past almost any checkpoint. Nobody questions a guy who looks like he belongs. Lance's preparation room reeked of sweat, cologne, and overconfidence. His corner crew laughed and joked while taping his hands, treating this like some celebrity photo shoot instead of a serious fight. When I pushed open the door with the authority of a safety supervisor, they barely glanced up. "Equipment inspection," I announced, my voice carrying the flat professionalism that made people assume you had legitimate business. Lance's grin widened when he spotted me. Well, oil boy came to watch me work," he said, his Boston accent thick as molasses. "Hope you brought tissues because your ex-wife's going to need them when she sees what a real champion looks like." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I pulled out my phone with the casual indifference of a man checking safety protocols. "Actually," I said, my voice steady as a pressure gauge, "I came to deliver a message." The screen lit up with crystal-clear video footage. Lance and two associates working over a local business owner in his shop, demanding protection money with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for debt collection. The timestamp was recent, just 3 weeks ago. Lance's smile evaporated faster than gas from a ruptured line. "Where the hell did you get that?" "Same place I got these," I replied, swiping to photos of Amber creating fake dental. Billing records complete with patient information she'd used to launder money into offshore accounts. I let the images sink in while Lance's corner crew suddenly found other places to be. "The FBI loves financial crimes," I continued conversationally, "especially when they involve medical fraud and identity theft. But they really get excited when college scholarships are funded by criminal enterprises." Lance's face went from confident to concerned to genuinely frightened in about 5 seconds. "Leave Paige out of this. She doesn't know anything about my business. Pre-med, full ride to University of Houston," I said, nodding appreciatively. "Smart kid, bright future. Be a shame if her big brother's criminal activity destroyed all that hard work. Student loan debt's a killer these days." Lance stepped forward, hands clenching into fists, but I didn't even blink. "Go ahead," I said. "Take another swing. See how that worked out last time. But this is bigger than broken bones now. This is about choices." I slipped my phone back into my pocket with the deliberate care of a man handling explosive materials. "You've got 2 options, tough guy. Take a dive in the second round and disappear after tonight, or I send these files to every law enforcement agency in Texas. Your choice, but choose fast. The fight starts in 20 minutes. For the first time since I'd known him, Lance looked genuinely afraid. The cocky fighter deflated like a punctured air tank, his confidence replaced by the kind of panic that comes from realizing you've stepped in quicksand. "You're crazy," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," I replied, adjusting my cap like a supervisor finishing a routine inspection. "I'm thorough. There's a difference." Lance stared at the floor, breathing hard, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Second round, then I'm gone." "Smart choice," I said, heading for the door like nothing significant had happened. "Consider this your professional development review. You failed." The crowd's excitement turned to ugly confusion as Lance hit the canvas in the second round, dropping from a punch that barely grazed his chin. The referee rushed in, but anyone who'd watched real fights could tell this was theater. Bad theater at that. The venue erupted with boos and accusations of fraud, while I stood calmly in the crowd, watching chaos unfold like a controlled burn. Sports betting operations hate fixed fights, almost as much as they hate losing money. Lance had just burned every bridge in his professional world, with one obviously fake knockout. By tomorrow morning, his fighting career would be over, his gym connections severed, and his reputation destroyed. Lance Rodriguez would disappear into whatever hole fraudsters crawl into when their luck runs out, leaving Amber to face the music alone. But the real show was just beginning. Lance's professional suicide was merely the opening act. Amber's performance was scheduled for the main event, and I had front row seats to watch justice serve itself with all the precision of a perfectly executed drilling operation. The crowd's angry shouting followed me through the exit, but inside, I felt nothing but the calm satisfaction of a job well done. Phase 1 complete. Time to move on to Phase 2, where Amber would discover what happens when you bet against someone who's spent 20 years learning exactly how much pressure different things can take before they shatter completely. By dawn, Lance Rodriguez had vanished like steam from a relief valve. His challenger disappeared from the gym parking lot, his apartment emptied overnight, and his training facility locked up with a hastily scrawled "closed indefinitely" sign. The boxing community buzzed with rumors about fixed fights and illegal gambling, but Lance was already a ghost story. Amber, however, had much bigger problems brewing than a missing boyfriend. I found her in the dental office parking lot that afternoon, pacing in circles like a caged animal while screaming into her phone. Her voice carried the shrill panic of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time. She was so focused on her crisis that she didn't notice me until I spoke. "Rough day at the office?" My tone was casual as discussing weather conditions on the rig. Amber spun around, her face pale with the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've miscalculated something fundamental. "You did this," she accused, her voice cracking. "My accounts are frozen. The bank says federal investigators flagged them for suspicious activity. Actually, I replied with the patience of explaining safety procedures to new crew, you did this. I just made sure the right people noticed. Turns out the FBI takes financial fraud pretty seriously, especially when it involves medical identity theft. Her phone slipped from trembling fingers as the full scope of her situation hit home. Please, Brock, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but... I pulled out my own phone and pressed play, cutting her off mid-sentence. Amber's voice filled the parking lot air, crystal clear recordings of her discussing money laundering techniques and fake billing procedures with Lance. Her face went white as drilling mud as she listened to herself confessing to federal crimes. You recorded me, she whispered. I record everything, I said, my voice carrying the cold authority of a shutdown supervisor. 20 years offshore teaches you to document every critical decision. Amazing what people will say when they think nobody's listening. I reached into my pocket one final time, pulling out my wedding ring. The gold caught afternoon sunlight as I held it up between us. 15 years, Amber. 15 years I spent building something I thought we both wanted. I dropped the ring at her feet, where it clinked against asphalt like a wrench hitting concrete. You declared war on me. Problem is, you forgot to check whether you had the right equipment for the job. Within a week, federal investigators had seized every account connected to Amber's fraudulent schemes. Local news outlets picked up the story, running headlines about dental office fraud and money laundering operations. Her face appeared on television under graphics reading, "Medical professional charged in multi-state financial conspiracy." The trial was swift and thorough. I testified with the same methodical precision I use for incident reports, laying out every fraudulent transaction, every recorded conversation, every piece of evidence that painted the complete picture of their criminal enterprise. When the prosecutor asked about Amber's role in the conspiracy, I spoke plainly. She wasn't just helping Lance Rodriguez, I said. She was the operational brain behind the entire scheme. Lance handled intimidation and debt collection, but Amber managed the financial logistics, created the false identities, and designed the laundering system. Without her expertise, it would have been small-time muscle work instead of organized financial crime. Amber broke down crying during my testimony, but the evidence spoke louder than tears. When the judge read her sentence, 12 years in federal prison with eligibility for parole after 8, the courtroom fell silent as a shutdown rig. Lance's downfall happened faster and more publicly. Videos of him beating business owners for protection money spread across social media like wildfire. His fighting license was permanently revoked. Sponsors fled like gas escaping a ruptured line. And his name became synonymous with corruption in local sports circles. Some people said he fled to Mexico. Others claimed he was hiding in South America under a fake identity. I heard all the rumors and felt no need to verify them. Lance Rodriguez had ceased to matter the moment he decided to threaten me in my own garage. That evening, I sat in my workshop with a single beer, listening to the familiar hum of compressors and the distant sound of traffic. My wedding ring was gone, but the weight of 15 wasted years had lifted like pressure bleeding from an overstressed system. I raised the beer slowly, staring at the amber liquid. Some wars end with negotiations, I murmured to myself. Some end with surrender. This one ended with demolition. The months that followed brought unexpected peace. I threw myself into work that mattered, volunteering with organizations supporting injured oil workers and organizing funds for families who'd lost breadwinners to industrial accidents. My name started appearing on charity boards and safety committees, places where my experience actually meant something. Sometimes, working late in my garage, I'd think about Amber, not with anger anymore, but with the grim acceptance that comes from understanding equipment, failure. Our marriage had developed stress fractures years before the final blowout. Lance Rodriguez had just been the spark that ignited an already volatile situation. One evening, my phone buzzed with Cole Patterson's familiar number. "Got something you might find interesting, Sully," he said. "There's a crew running worker compensation scams on injured offshore guys. Big operation, lots of money. Thought you might want to know." I leaned back in my chair, looking around my workshop at tools that had built and rebuilt my life more times than I could count. "Send me the details," I said finally. As I climbed into my truck that night, I felt the familiar calm settle over me, the same focused determination I'd always felt before tackling dangerous work. Some people retire from difficult jobs. Others find new challenges that matter. The real war wasn't on the rigs. It was right here, against people who preyed on those who'd already sacrificed everything. For Brock Sullivan, the mission was just beginning.